The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was a 6-season-long show that followed a kid from Philadelphia moving in with his better-off aunt and uncle in Bel-Air. What follows is a cultural clash that sees our lead's lives compared and contrasted to his cousins, until ultimately the two parties find common ground, some of his family members faster than others. They find comfort in their differences and form a close bond over the years, and learn to accept and appreciate each other's different lifestyles. There's obviously a lot more to it, but that's the narrative in a nutshell. And I gotta tell ya, it was one of my all-time favorite shows growing up. I tuned into every episode whenever I could, and I loved every minute of it. Until I didn't. I think there's a fair amount of the audience that would probably say that the show never died, and I can understand that mentality entirely. The show didn't see a major decline the way that a lot of other shows I've covered on this channel have. I can't claim the series ever did anything as disastrous as the last seasons of shows like That 70s Show or How I Met Your Mother. And I also can't sit here and act like the series ever got as bad as shows like 2.5 Men or The Office did in their final days. But I do think, without a doubt, the show made a miscalculation they couldn't course correct along the way. Or, if they could, they just didn't bother to. Now, there's also a school of thought that the show died a death when the original Aunt Viv, actress Janet Hubert, left the show, only to be replaced by Daphne Maxwell Reid, who many fans felt was an inferior replacement. And I've gone into my own thoughts on that in another video, feel free to check it out, but I do think that that logic is a little bit flawed. Don't get me wrong, there was definitely a change when she left, as Aunt Viv got a total makeover and was made into much more of a fixture of the show, rather than her own standalone character. In short, Daphne Maxwell Reid wasn't ever asked to do what Janet Hubert did, and she never would be. The character was completely rewritten, so much so that she feels like a different character entirely. The first 3 seasons of the show and the last 3 seasons of the show seem like 2 completely different experiences. This is not the same person. This is somebody who just happens to share the same name. A family and living situation. That's not the same character, that's it. While I don't hate what they did with the actress in the part, as she was fairly serviceable as your typical TV mom, the character just straight up wasn't the same without Janet. But the show also didn't try to act like she was. The inclusion of the new actress pushed both Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil to the background. The rest of the family was moved to the forefront, with some of the most Carlton, Hillary, and Ashley-centric episodes coming from the final 3 seasons of the show. What the show lacked for in Aunt and Uncle, it made up for in Cousins. So saying the show just carried on as a shell of its former self when Janet left seems really disingenuous. There was definitely an empty space left and a missing element from the show following the actress's departure, but the later episodes of the show's run still managed to get a laugh and feel worthwhile. They just went about doing that differently. As a matter of fact, the later seasons of the show introduced audiences to Will's longest-lasting relationship with Lisa. For 15 episodes, the part of Will's significant other was played by Nia Long, and the two shared an incredible chemistry. Even if their relationship had strange beginnings, the foundation between the two was very strong. They seemed genuinely happy in each other's company, and this pairing added a fresh new dynamic to a show that was starting to run out of steam, just from having gone the distance with all these characters for as long as they did. It was also a nice change of pace to see Will settle down with someone who seemed to work well with him. Later that season, when Will's hospitalized, he proposes to Lisa, who eagerly accepts, with the second to last season's season finale showcasing the next step in their relationship. The season 5 finale was centered around the wedding of the greatest pairing this side of Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil. Will and Lisa were set to make it down the aisle. But this episode tears down the couple that this season worked so hard to build. Suddenly they're written to be strangers. They're shown to know very little about each other, despite being in a relationship for a full season, seeming to know each other very well, and experiencing hardships that brought the two closer together over time. They're now as far apart as could be, with the episode that's supposed to bring them together serving to take them apart. The two ultimately agree that they rush down the aisle and call off their wedding, which is sad enough on its own. Even after it's agreed at the altar that the two aren't ready for marriage, they profess their love for one another. So it would seem like they were going to continue as a couple, just now they'll wait a while before they take the next big step. Except Lisa's father decides to propose to Will's mother, whom he just met, and they have their wedding there instead. thus making the two step-siblings. Though the two quickly and quietly accept this and stand by as their ceremony continues for their parents. Because that's a thing that happens. Now, you may think that this would lead to some sort of development in future stories next season, but neither Lisa nor her father Fred ever return to the show. Even when Will's mother makes future appearances in the series, the fate of Fred and Lisa is never again mentioned. They're non-factors. That whole plot literally created just to not marry Will off. So within the same season that this relationship starts, it ends. To make matters even worse, Lisa's not given any fanfare. Not only do the two split apart in the season 5 finale, the episode doesn't end with their breakup, but instead immediately moves on to Will moving on, which feels so wrong. It just feels so wrong to have written this character off so easily. She made for a great companion for Will, and an interesting character outside of her significant other, played by a talented actress. Fans wanted to see Will and Lisa make things work. They were invested in their relationship. I understand that not all stories can have a perfect happy ending, but it would have been nice if this got an ending at all. It's sort of just left on a to be continued, but then it's never continued. But on top of all that, if there were ever two characters that you wanted to see get a happy ending, it would probably be Will and Lisa. Outside of a short stint with Tyra Banks' character, this was the only relationship that ever really worked for Will. Yeah, the guy was shown to be a ladies' man and he went with many a women in his time. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But none of the relationships that he found himself in seemed worthwhile past the initial flirtation. Lisa actually felt important to Will. And more importantly, important to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. This was a major letdown to fans, and a little bit of a setback to the show in a few different ways. Will ending a long-term healthy relationship that looked like it would last, just to suddenly return to his old ways felt like an unfortunate development. The character was evolving, and after seeing him settle down, watching him go back to flirting with randoms kind of felt like a little bit of a tired retread. And make no mistake, they didn't stop this relationship because they had something better lined up for him. There was never any worthwhile additions to Will's love life following this. So taking Lisa out of the equation just made one less character for him to interact with, and it completely deconstructed a path that season paved. Lisa was a positive influence on Will's life. Her presence made him mature and further develop as a character and as a person. Their time together felt like time well spent. Will was growing up and moving on with his life. But when the two were split apart for nearly no reason at all, Will is left completely directionless for the remaining show. With the first episode of Season 6's main story being Will being beyond bored. And then the final episode of the season, and the show, showcasing the characters being lost. Which I think is indicative of the show at the time. The last season of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air just felt exactly like Will felt. Bored and lost. I don't think the season is necessarily bad, it's bland. These episodes aren't bad on their own. They're bad for character development purposes, but they're not bad on their own viewing. However, watching Season 6 feels like you're watching a compilation of filler episodes from previous seasons past. They just can't line up with anything this show has already done. And I'm not dunking on it for that, but I am saying that is in fact a thing. I don't know if that speaks for the lack of quality of this season per se, or the overall quality of the show, and setting a bar that was so high that it became unattainable for itself. Without Lisa, Will was kinda without a support system, and he faces a whole new slew of hardships and faces them alone. Namely, his family and friends moving on with their lives, with a future in sight for each supporting character, whereas he has none. Will ends the show sad and alone. And I'm sorry, but that's not the ending I wanted to see for Will Smith. The character, not the actor.
Keep my name out your fucking mouth!
I'm going to. Okay.
The final season of the show, and even its eventual ending, points to the future of the character being uncertain. Everyone talks about how sad that last scene in the show was, but I believe that sadness looms over the last season entirely, only reaching its peak within the series finale. I wouldn't say that this season isn't thought fondly of. I would say that this season isn't really thought of at all. When people talk about the series, the discussion usually centers around the first 3 to 5 seasons. A lot of fans of the show that I've spoken to didn't even remember that Lisa and Will didn't last, or virtually anything that came from season 6. The last season of the show wasn't necessarily terrible. The episodes weren't entirely awful, but a few were memorable. They weren't terrible quality, but they weren't top quality either. Season 6 is widely accepted to be the worst and lowest ranked of the entire series. There weren't any further developments made to the characters until the final few episodes, with the whole season feeling like it was made up of filler. Ultimately, I think the show ended at the right time. It was just starting to stagnate. Though I can't help but think that Nia Long's exit contributed greatly to the show's slow deflation. It's interesting to think what the exclusion of one character did for the rest of the series. I've always gotten the feeling that the show didn't really know what it had with that story, but that doesn't mean fans of the show didn't. The character was recognized and valued enough to be reimagined in the reboot years down the line, bringing her into the mythos much earlier and giving her a more prominent role. This last season makes Will feel like he's a passenger in his own vehicle. The show doesn't even end giving Will a prospect at what may come, but instead it gives him promise in the hope he has following one last life lesson from Uncle Phil. For me personally, the show never fully recovered from the backtracking it did with Will's would-be wife. I think it really stalled the progress of the show overall, and it made the last season feel like Will was kept on pause while it fast-forwarded through the rest of the series' leads' lives. I'm not trying to make the last season seem like it's entirely bad, but it's definitely the least good one. With that being said, for me, that's when and why The Fresh Prince died. If you like this video and want to see more of the Day It Died content here on the channel, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
Reminds me of the Fresh Prince.
I am vengeance. I am the night. And that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.